What if I told you a single yellow flag can sound like a starting pistol? The stadium holds its breath, the crowd splits between groans and cheers, and in the blink, it feels like the whole game, maybe the whole season, has been nudged one way or another. That's what happened early in Bills Chiefs. A play looked like a sack, then a flag flew, and the internet caught fire. Picture it. Third down, a collapsing pocket, Joey Bosa bulldozing through, and Patrick Mahomes hits the turf. For a heartbeat, the highlight reels write a different headline. Then a flag. Holding on the Bills' secondary, the sack erased, a roar in the opposite direction. If you were watching in a bar or scrolling X, the reactions came swift and immediate. Disbelief, jokes, rage, conspiracy theories. Where's the flag? Flipped instantly to, there it is, of course. Fans love a narrative, and nothing feeds a narrative faster than a call that seems to change the story. Now let's zoom out. Sports have always lived in a space where spectacle meets rules, but watchers don't just watch plays, they watch perceived fairness. When calls seem to help one team repeatedly, suspicion grows until it's a muscle memory. Chiefs get help, Chiefs get luck. It's not just about the single penalty anymore. It's about years of micro moments stacking into a worldview that becomes harder to shake. Fans don't always ask for proof, they ask for patterns, and patterns, true or not, become proof in groupthink. That's why this particular flag landed with so much heat. It negated what would have been a big-time play for Buffalo, one that could have changed the flow. On social platforms, the commentary was immediate and merciless. People pointed to precedent, to late-game miracles, to the optics of preferential calls. Phantom holding, some called it. Others dug for examples, for receipts. When emotions run high, memory selects the evidence it wants. And in this league, memory favors the dramatic. But there's another side, quieter and less satisfying. Officials are human. They stand under lights and cameras, making decisions in real time from angles we don't have. They're subject to pressure, from crowds, from coaches, from the stream of history whispering in their ears. A snap decision looks simple on replay, but is messy in the moment. Sometimes the yellow fabric means a referee saw a hand in the wrong place. Sometimes it's an instinct. And yes, sometimes the replay makes us think the call was wrong. The truth lives in those half seconds between perception and review. What makes calls combustible is when they interact with narrative inevitability. Chiefs versus Bills is more than a game. It's a chapter in a story about rematches and redemption. The last AFC title game was recent memory, and refs have historically been a lightning rod in big games. When a call happens that could have erased a pivotal play, fans don't just argue accuracy, they argue justice. They ask, who gets to decide what justice looks like when millions are watching? But here's the twist most of us miss when we're yelling at our phones. A single call rarely writes the final chapter alone. Football is 1,000 little events braided together. Missed assignments, penalties, clock management, a dropped pass, a forced fumble. The flag that erased Bosa's sack mattered, yes. It changed field position on that drive. It altered play calling. But the game kept moving. Later, Mahomes struggled. The Bills' defense found pressure in other ways. Maxwell Harrison made the interception that truly swung the door shut, and Joey Bosa's relentless heat kept coming. The scoreboard read a final margin that suggested the Bills' overall performance outweighed that early indignity. That reality doesn't make the outrage invalid. It only makes it more human. Fans are storytellers by habit. We want the moment that explains everything. A controversial call fits neatly into a single sentence. The refs bailed out the Chiefs. It's neat, fast, and it hurts to hear when you're on the wrong side. But when you look at the tape of the full day, the drops, the defensive stands, the runs that ate the clock, you see a more distributed picture of cause and effect. There's also the institutional angle. Perception of bias chips away at trust, and leagues know trust is fragile currency. The NFL has to worry less about one social media meltdown and more about the cumulative impression. If fans increasingly believe outcomes are being nudged, viewership and faith in officiating erode. That's why we hear about rule clarifications, why officials get retrained, why replay mechanics evolve. They chase both accuracy and the appearance of fairness because optics, yes, optics, matter as much as the calls themselves. And let's be honest, the officiating theater is a mirror to our times. We live in an era of instant replay, endless commentary, and fan communities that amplify every perceived slight. A call that once might have been argued in a living room now travels the globe in seconds. Reaction becomes a product. Outrage becomes content. So the emotional temperature of a single flag is higher now than it would have been a decade ago. That doesn't excuse bad calls, but it explains why a single whistle can feel like a verdict. What about the players? For them, it isn't theory. A flagged play can be a raw, immediate injury to momentum and morale. For Bosa, being stripped of a sack on a stat sheet is petty against the background of a team's fight. For defensive backs, a holding flag can sting for days because it reduces the physical chess they play to a bureaucratic penalty. For Mahomes and the Chiefs, the world is less forgiving. Every benefit becomes a headline, every misstep a scandal. Players get used to the noise, but it still presses at the edges of performance. In the end, maybe the lesson is less about a single call and more about how we manage the relationship between truth and trust. Replays will keep improving, training will sharpen, but fans will also keep watching closely, and that scrutiny is a check on the game. It's messy, it's loud, it's inevitable, and in the best cases, it pushes the league toward better systems. So, what's the takeaway from that flag play early in Bills Chiefs? It's that sports are not just measured in points, but in perception. A single yellow flag can ignite 1,000 hot takes, but it rarely carries the story alone. Ultimately, the Bills won because they beat the Chiefs across dozens of moments, not because of one overturned sack or one phantom hold. The flag mattered, emotionally, narratively, but it wasn't the whole truth. If you're still angry about the call, that's valid. If you think it proves a conspiracy, you're not alone. But if you watch the full game again, you'll find something steadier. Football is messy, officiating is imperfect, and the only guarantee is this: fans will keep yelling, officials will keep making calls, and the next controversial whistle will be just around the corner. And when it comes, we'll be ready with our phones, our opinions, and most of all, our hunger to see justice in a sport that, for all its rules, still lives by the drama of the next play. You ever watch a play and feel the stadium tilt? Not because of a genius route or perfect throw, but because a single yellow flag walked onto the field and rewrote the moment? That's the feeling that swallowed Sunday's Bills-Chiefs game. A tight, playoff-caliber battle that plenty of fans will remember not for Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, but for one call that turned a sack into a continued drive and turned Twitter into a jury. ESPN.com, it happened early, with the kind of timing that makes a whole afternoon feel different. Buffalo's defense appeared to have Patrick Mahomes to rights. A pressure, a hit, a pile forming around the quarterback, only for the officials to throw a flag for defensive holding that wiped the play away. The on-field sack that would have handed the Bills momentum vanished. Instead, Kansas City kept the ball and the chance to swing the scoreboard. Fans exploded, calling it phantom officiating and pointing at a pattern they say keeps favoring the Chiefs. TheSpun.com. Let's be blunt about what the flag does. It's not just 5 yards, it's the eraser on the momentum marker. A forced 3 and out turns into a fresh set of downs. The emotional lift a defense gets from a big play, the crowd surge, the sideline energy, the reduced strain on your offense, evaporates in a heartbeat. In a one-score game against elite competition, those seconds and yards compound into real consequences. ESPN's box score shows this was a tightly contested game that swung back and forth. That single reversal is the kind of micro-event that can tilt the macro story. ESPN.com. Why did fans go nuclear? Because this wasn't an isolated feeling. It was a narrative that has been building for Buffalo fans for a long time. Clips from prior Bills-Chiefs matchups, including the AFC title game, resurfaced online showing disputed spots, questionable no calls, and moments where the crew adjusted the ball's position after a conference. People remember those, and when something similar happens again, the reaction isn't just anger. It's confirmation bias turned into outrage. Social timelines filled with "where's the flag" and "rigged," because once you see a pattern, every new instance looks like evidence. SI. But let's walk into the rulebook for a second. Defensive holding is, by definition, a player grabbing or impeding a receiver or blocker in a way that prevents a play from developing. The call is judgment heavy. Did the hand on the jersey materially affect the route or the play? Did it prevent separation? Referees train to see it in real time, but human eyes, broadcast angles, and the speed of the game create massive gray areas. Replay helps in some cases, but not all infractions are reviewable. A flag called and then picked up can leave more questions than answers. The subjectivity is baked into the job. No wonder fans see it as inconsistent, because it is. TheSpun.com. So what actually happened to the game? The Bills still won 28-21, and that's important. Buffalo found ways to respond later. A Joey Bosa-driven pass rush that repeatedly bothered Mahomes and a late interception by rookie Maxwell Hairston that sealed the deal. The scoreboard gave Buffalo the victory, but the memory of the controversy stuck because, to many viewers, it looked like the refs had handed Kansas City a lifeline the Bills had earned to rip away. The dual reality, clean stat sheet and dirty feeling, is what fuels heated debates long after the final whistle. ESPN.com. Now the larger cost, trust. The NFL sells drama, but it also sells fairness. When segments of the fan base lose faith in impartial officiating, the product shifts from sport to spectacle. Fans don't just complain about a single play. They complain because they suspect a recurring bias, whether real or imagined, favoring marquee teams or marquee players. That's poisonous because the league's legitimacy rests on the belief that the game is decided on merit, not markers. Viral videos, replay breakdowns, and partisan punditry amplify this distrust and make reconciliation harder. What could fix this? Short-term, clearer communication. The league and referees can be more transparent about why a call stood or was picked up, and replay booths could use brief on-air explanations when a reversal changes possession. Long-term, better tech, more cameras, standardized angles for replays, even some automated enforcement in clear-cut cases could reduce subjectivity. None of this is easy. Football lives in messy, contact-heavy moments, but small improvements in clarity would go a long way toward calming the social media fires. And here's what players and coaches learn to live with. The game is part sport, part narrative management. Coaches must prepare teams to respond when calls go against them. Make the next play, take the next snap, strip the narrative of power by answering on the field. Winners don't whine, they adapt. The Bills did that, turning a hot moment into a triumph by leaning on fundamentals. Pressure the passer, win third downs, and make the opponent earn every yard. That's why they walked out of the stadium with the better record and, crucially, the better result. ESPN.com. But fans will keep arguing, highlights will keep circulating, and every future Chiefs-Bills moment will carry the weight of these two things, excellence on the field and suspicion off it. That's the real loss here. When the narrative surrounding a rivalry becomes as influential as the rivalry itself, every play is judged not only on technique, but on history. And history has memory. So what should you take away if you're making a highlight reel or a hot take video? Start with the facts. The flag, the reversal, the final score. Then show the context, prior disputed calls, the viral clips that stoked the suspicion, and the in-game plays that actually decided the result. Let the viewer feel the outrage, then give them the tape and the rules to decide for themselves. That's honest storytelling. Final thought, sports runs on two currencies, the scoreboard and public trust. Buffalo bought the former on Sunday. A flag tried to steal a little of the latter. Wins heal a lot, but not everything. When a replay looks wrong and a stadium erupts, that moment becomes bigger than just football. It becomes a reminder that the game is played in human bodies, called by human eyes, and watched by millions who demand not just excitement, but fairness. The scoreboard will say 28-21 for Buffalo. The conversation will stay unsettled, and that, more than any flag, is why fans keep watching and arguing at the same time. ESPN.com.